4th Maccabees chapter 11. When he, too, died, after being cruelly tortured, the fifth leaped up, saying, I will not refuse, tyrant, to be tortured for the sake of virtue. I have come of my own accord, so that by murdering me you will incur punishment from the heavenly justice for even more crimes. Hater of virtue, hater of humankind, for what act of ours are you destroying us in this way? Is it because we revere the Creator of all things and live according to his virtuous law? But these deeds deserve honors, not tortures. While he was saying these things, the guards bound him and dragged him to the catapult. They tied him to it on his knees, and fitting iron clamps on them, they twisted his back around the wedge on the wheel, so that he was completely curled back like a scorpion, and all his members were disjointed. In this condition, gasping for breath, and in anguish of body, he said, Tyrant, they are splendid favors that you grant us against your will, because through these noble sufferings you give us an opportunity to show our endurance for the law. When he, too, had died, the sixth, a mere boy, was led forward. When the tyrant inquired whether he was willing to eat and be released, he said, I am younger in age than my brothers, but I am their equal in mind. Since to this end we were born and bred, we ought likewise to die for the same principles. So if you intend to torture me for not eating defiling foods, go on torturing. When he had said this, they led him to the wheel. He was carefully stretched tight upon it. His back was broken, and he was roasted from underneath. To his back they applied sharp spits that had been heated in the fire and pierced his ribs so that his entrails were burned through. While being tortured, he said, O contest befitting holiness, in which so many of us brothers have been summoned to an arena of sufferings for the sake of piety, and in which we have not been defeated. For pious knowledge, O tyrant, is invincible. I also, equipped with nobility, will die with my brothers, and I myself will bring a great avenger upon you, you inventor of tortures and enemy of those who are truly pious. We 6 boys have overthrown your tyranny, since you have not been able to persuade us to change our mind, or to force us to eat defiling foods. Is not this your downfall? Your fire is cold to us, and the catapults painless, and your violence powerless. For it is not the guards of the tyrant, but those of the divine law that are set over us. Therefore we hold fast to invincible reason. 4th Maccabees chapter 12. When he, too, thrown into the cauldron, had died a blessed death, the 7th and youngest of all came forward. Even though the tyrant had been vehemently reproached by the brothers, he felt strong compassion for this child when he saw that he was already in fetters. He summoned him to come nearer and tried to persuade him, saying, You see the result of your brothers' stupidity, for they died in torments because of their disobedience. You, too, if you do not obey, will be miserably tortured and die before your time. But if you yield to persuasion, you will be my friend and a leader in the government of the kingdom. When he had thus appealed to him, he sent for the boy's mother to show compassion on her who had been bereaved of so many sons, and to influence her to persuade the surviving son to obey and save himself. But after his mother had exhorted him in the Hebrew language, as we shall tell a little later, he said, Let me loose, let me speak to the king and to all his friends who are with him. Extremely pleased by the boy's declaration, they freed him at once. Running to the nearest of the braziers, he said, You profane tyrant, most impious of all the wicked, since you have received good things and also your kingdom from God, were you not ashamed to murder his servants and torture on the wheel the athletes of piety? Because of this, justice has laid up for you a more intense and eternal fire and tortures, and these throughout all time will never let you go. As a man, you are not ashamed, you most savage beast, to cut out the tongues of people who have feelings like yours, and are made of the same elements as you, and to maltreat and torture them in this way. Surely they, by dying nobly, fulfilled their pious duty to God, but you will wail bitterly for having killed without cause the contestants for virtue. Then, because he too was about to die, he said, I do not desert the excellent example of my brothers, and I call on the God of our ancestors to be merciful to our nation. But on you he will take vengeance, both in this present life and when you are dead. After he had uttered these imprecations, he flung himself into the braziers, and so ended his life. 4 Maccabees chapter 13. Since then the 7 brothers despised sufferings even unto death. Everyone must concede that pious reason is sovereign over the passions. For if they had been slaves to their passions and had eaten defiling food, we would say that they had been conquered by these passions. But in fact it was not so. Instead, by reason, which is praised before God, they prevailed over their passions. The supremacy of the mind over these cannot be overlooked, for the brothers mastered both passions and pains. How, then, can one fail to confess the sovereignty of right reason over passion in those who were not turned back by fiery agonies? For just as towers jutting out over harbors hold back the threatening waves and make it calm for those who sail into the inner basin, so the 7-towered right reason of the youths, by fortifying the harbor of piety, conquered the tempest of the passions. For they constituted a holy chorus of piety and emboldened one another, saying, Brothers, let us die like brothers for the sake of the law. Let us imitate the 3 youths in Assyria who despised the same ordeal of the furnace. Let us not be cowardly in the demonstration of our piety. While one said, Courage, brother, another said, Bear up nobly, and another reminded them, Remember whence you came, and the father by whose hand Isaac would have submitted to being slain for the sake of piety. Each of them, and all of them together looking at one another, cheerful and undaunted, said, Let us with all our hearts consecrate ourselves to God, who gave us our lives, and let us use our bodies as a bulwark for the law. Let us not fear him who thinks he is killing us, for great is the soul's contest, and the danger of eternal torment lying before those who transgress the commandment of God. Therefore, let us put on the full armor of mastery of the passions that divine reason provides. For if we so die, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob will welcome us, and all the fathers will praise us. Those who were left behind said to each of the brothers who were being dragged away, Do not put us to shame, brother, or betray the brothers who have died before us. You are not ignorant of the affection of family ties, which the divine and all-wise providence has bequeathed through the fathers to their descendants, and which was implanted in the mother's womb. There the brothers spent the same length of time, and were shaped during the same period of time. And growing from the same blood and through the same life, they were brought to the light of day. When they were born after an equal time of gestation, they drank milk from the same fountains. From such embraces, brotherly loving souls are nourished, and they grow stronger from this common nurture and daily companionship, and from both general education and our discipline in the law of God. Therefore, when sympathy and brotherly affection had been so established, the 7 brothers were the more sympathetic to one another, since they had been educated by the same law and trained in the same virtues, and brought up together in right living. They loved one another all the more. A common zeal for nobility strengthened their goodwill toward one another, and their concord, because they could make their brotherly love more fervent with the aid of piety. But although nature and companionship and virtuous habits had augmented the affection of family ties, those who were left endured for the sake of piety, watching their brothers being maltreated and tortured to death. 4 Maccabees chapter 14. Furthermore, they encouraged them to face the torture so that they not only despised their agonies, but also mastered the passions of brotherly love. O reason, more royal than kings and freer than the free, O sacred harmony of the 7 brothers, well tuned in regard to piety, none of the 7 youths proved coward or shrank from death, but all of them, as though running the course toward immortality, hastened to death by torture. Just as the hands and feet are moved in harmony with the guidance of the mind, so those holy youths, as though moved by an immortal spirit of piety, agreed to go to death for its sake. O most holy 7, brothers in harmony. For just as the 7 days of creation move in choral dance around piety, so these youths, forming a chorus of 7, encircled the fear of tortures and dissolved it. Even now, we ourselves shudder as we hear of the suffering of these young men. They not only saw what was happening, not only heard the direct word of threat, but also bore the suffering steadfastly, and in agonies of fire at that. What could be more excruciatingly painful than this? For the power of fire is intense and swift, and it consumed their bodies quickly. Do not consider it amazing that reason had full command over these men in their tortures, since even the mind of woman despised more diverse agonies, for the mother of the 7 young men bore up under the rackings of each one of her children. Observe how complex is a mother's love for her children, which draws everything toward a sympathy felt in her inmost parts. Even unreasoning animals, as well as humans, have a sympathy and parental love for their offspring. For example, among birds, the ones that are tame protect their young by building on the housetops, and the others by building at the tops of mountains and the depths of chasms, in holes of trees, and on treetops, hatch the nestlings and ward off the intruder. If they are not able to keep the intruder away, they do what they can to help their young by flying in circles around them in the anguish of love, warning them with their own calls. And why is it necessary to demonstrate sympathy for children by the example of unreasoning animals, since even bees at the time for making honeycombs defend themselves against intruders and, as though with an iron dart, sting those who approach their hive and defend it even to the death? But sympathy for her children did not sway the mother of the young men. She was of the same mind as Abraham. 4th Maccabees chapter 15. O reason of the children, tyrant over the passions, O piety, more desirable to the mother than her children. 2 courses were open to this mother, that of piety, and that of preserving her 7 sons for a time, as the tyrant had promised. She loved piety more, the piety that preserves them for eternal life according to God's promise. In what manner might I express the passions of parents who love their children? We impress upon the character of a small child a wondrous likeness both of mind and of form. Especially is this true of mothers, who because of their birth pangs have a deeper sympathy toward their offspring than do the fathers. For to the extent that mothers are of tender spirit and bear more children, so much the more attached are they to their children. The mother of the 7 boys, more than any other mother, loved her children. In 7 pregnancies she had implanted in herself tender love toward them, and because of the many pains she suffered with each of them, she had sympathy for them. Yet because of the fear of God, she disdained the temporary safety of her children. Not only so, but also because of the nobility of her sons and their ready obedience to the law, she felt a greater tenderness toward them. For they were just and self-controlled and courageous and magnanimous and loved their brothers and their mother, so that they obeyed her even to death in keeping the ordinances. Nevertheless, though so many factors influenced the mother to suffer with them out of love for her children, in the case of none of them were the various tortures strong enough to pervert her reason, but each child separately, and all of them together, the mother urged on to death for piety's sake. O sacred nature, parental affection, tender love toward offspring, nursing, and indomitable maternal passions. This mother, who saw them tortured and burned one by one for piety's sake, did not change her attitude. She watched the flesh of her children being consumed by fire, their toes and fingers scattered on the ground, and the flesh of the head to the chin exposed like masks. O mother, tried now by more bitter pangs than even the birth pangs you suffered for them, O woman, who alone gave birth to such perfect piety, neither when the firstborn breathed his last it did not turn you aside, nor when the second in torments looked at you piteously, nor when the third expired. Nor did you weep when you looked at the eyes of each one in his tortures, gazing boldly at the same agonies, and saw in their nostrils the signs of the approach of death. When you saw the flesh of children burned upon the flesh of other children, severed hands upon hands, scalped heads upon heads, and corpses fallen on other corpses, and when you saw the place filled with many spectators because of the children's torments, you did not shed tears. Neither the melodies of sirens nor the songs of swans attract the attention of their hearers, as did the voices of the children in torture calling to their mother. How great and how many torments the mother then suffered as her sons were tortured on the wheel and with the hot irons. But pious reason, giving her heart a man's courage in the very midst of her passions, strengthened her to disregard, for the time, her parental love. Although she witnessed the destruction of 7 children and the ingenious and various rackings, this noble mother disregarded all these because of faith in God. For as in the council chamber of her own soul she saw mighty advocates, nature, family, parental love, and the instruments of torture awaiting her children. This mother held 2 ballots, one bearing death and the other deliverance for her children. She did not approve the deliverance that would preserve the 7 sons for a short time. But as the daughter of God-fearing Abraham, she remembered his fortitude. O Mother of the nation, vindicator of the law, and defender of piety, who carried away the prize of the contest in your heart, O more noble than males in steadfastness, and more courageous than men in endurance, just as Noah's ark, carrying the world in the universal flood, stoutly endured the waves, so you, O guardian of the law, overwhelmed from every side by the flood of your passions and the violent winds, the torture of your sons, endured nobly, and withstood the wintry storms raging on piety's account.